She hired him for one night. What happened next became a love legend. Asterisk. Have you ever wondered if fate exists? If two people are meant to find each other, no matter how unlikely their paths crossing might seem? Before we dive into this incredible true story that will change how you see love forever, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary tales that remind us of the magic in everyday life. Asterisk. The rain pelted against the windows of Eliza Bennett's downtown office as she stared at her computer screen, the cursor blinking mockingly at her. 24 hours. That's all she had left to save her event planning business from complete humiliation. Her biggest client, a tech mogul with deep pockets and even deeper connections, was expecting the perfect 30th birthday party for his wife tomorrow night. Everything was in place, the venue, the catering, the music, except for one critical detail. The sommelier she had hired, a renowned wine expert from France, had just called to say his flight was cancelled due to an unprecedented snowstorm in Paris. This can't be happening, Eliza whispered to herself, running her hands through her already disheveled hair. At 33, she had built her reputation on flawless execution and attention to detail. One mistake like this could undo years of hard work. The party was wine-themed, the birthday girl was a collector, and having no sommelier would be like hosting a symphony without a conductor. Her assistant, Maya, leaned against the doorframe, concern etched across her face. I've called every sommelier in the city. They're all booked. That's when Eliza remembered the business card. 3 weeks ago, at a small industry gathering, she had met a man who claimed to know wines better than he knew himself. He had handed her his card with a quiet confidence that had initially irritated her, another overconfident man in an industry full of them. She had tucked the card away, never expecting to need it. With trembling fingers, she dug through her desk drawer until she found it. James Sullivan. Wine consultant, it read in simple, elegant text. No flashy logos or pretentious titles. Just a name, profession, and a phone number. It's almost midnight, Maya warned. I have no choice, Eliza replied, already dialing. The phone rang 3 times before a deep, slightly raspy voice answered. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan? This is Eliza Bennett from Bennett Events. We met briefly at the Harvest Gala. I remember. Something in his tone suggested he remembered more than just the event. I have an emergency. I need a sommelier for tomorrow night. It's a high-profile event, and I'm desperate. I'll pay double your usual rate. There was a pause on the line, and Eliza felt her heart sink. Triple, he finally said. Excuse me? Triple my rate. And I want creative control over the wine selections. Eliza's professional instincts screamed at her to hang up. But desperation won. Fine. Be at the Glass House at 6 p.m. sharp tomorrow. Black tie. I'll be there at 5. We'll need to prep. Before she could protest, the line went dead. Eliza stared at her phone, wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her career or saved it. What Eliza couldn't know was that James Sullivan had remembered her vividly from their brief encounter. He had been struck by her fierce intelligence and the way she commanded respect in a room full of industry veterans. He had given her his card hoping she would call for a different reason entirely. When her name appeared on his phone that night, he had almost dropped it in surprise. The next evening, James arrived at the Glass House at exactly 5 p.m., dressed impeccably in a tailored black suit. Eliza, already frazzled from a day of last-minute adjustments, nearly didn't recognize him. At the gala, he had been wearing casual clothes, his dark hair slightly tousled. Now, with his tall frame accentuated by the perfect fit of his suit and his usually casual demeanor replaced by professional focus, he looked like he belonged in this world of luxury and refinement. You clean up well, she remarked, immediately regretting the unprofessional comment. James merely raised an eyebrow. I take my work seriously, Ms. Bennett. Now, show me the wine selection. For the next hour, They worked side by side in tense silence, James occasionally asking questions about the guests' preferences or making adjustments to the serving order. Eliza found herself simultaneously impressed by his expertise and annoyed by his self-assurance. "This Bordeaux should be served before the Barolo," he said at one point, rearranging the bottles. The client requested a memorable experience. "Trust me, this progression will tell a better story." Something about the way he said "story" made Eliza pause. "What do you mean?" James looked at her with intensity that made her heart skip. "Every great wine tasting tells a story, a journey that unfolds on the palate. Tonight's story is about transformation and discovery. Just like all great love stories." Before she could process his words, the first guests began to arrive, and the night swept them into its rhythm. Eliza watched from the periphery as James worked the room. He wasn't just serving wine, he was creating moments of connection. He spoke about each selection not with pretentious wine jargon but with stories, of the families who made them, the land that nurtured them, the traditions that shaped them. By the time he presented the final wine, a rare vintage that hadn't been on her original list, even the tech mogul was hanging on his every word. James raised his glass and spoke about how this particular wine represented the beauty of unexpected paths and serendipitous meetings. His eyes found Eliza's across the room as he said, "The best things in life are rarely planned. They surprise us when we least expect them." The party was a resounding success. As the last guests departed, showering Eliza with compliments, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Her business was safe. Her reputation intact. She found James in the back room, carefully packing away unopened bottles. "You saved me tonight," she admitted, leaning against the doorframe. "I did my job," he replied without looking up. "No, you did more than that. You turned a potential disaster into magic." He finally met her gaze. "Magic is just science we don't understand yet. Or so they say. Is that what you believe?" James paused, considering. "I believe some connections defy explanation." The air between them seemed to charge with unspoken possibilities. Eliza cleared her throat. "Well, I should get your payment arranged. Triple rate, as agreed." "Actually," James said, closing the distance between them with 2 slow steps, "I've reconsidered my fee." Eliza tensed. "We had a deal." "I don't want your money, Eliza. I want one thing instead." "What's that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Coffee. Tomorrow morning. Just you and me, talking about something other than wine or events." The request was so unexpected, so disarmingly simple, that Eliza found herself laughing. "That's it? Coffee?" James smiled, and for the first time that night, she saw vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. "For now, that's enough." That coffee turned into breakfast, which extended into a walk through the city's botanical gardens, which somehow became dinner. They talked about everything, his journey from a small town in Oregon to studying viticulture in France, her struggle to build her business after leaving a soul-crushing corporate job. They discovered shared loves, old bookstores, obscure films, hiking at dawn. And differences that somehow complemented each other, his methodical approach to problems versus her intuitive leaps, his love of classical music against her passion for indie rock. For 6 months, they existed in a bubble of new love, the kind that makes ordinary moments feel sacred. James joined Eliza at her events when needed, their professional partnership enhancing their personal one. He introduced her to the nuanced world of wines, teaching her to discern not just flavors but stories in each bottle. She showed him how to find beauty in the chaos of city life, something the country boy in him had resisted. But reality eventually intruded. James received an offer to oversee a vineyard renovation in Tuscany, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that aligned perfectly with his dream of someday owning his own vineyard. The project would take at least a year, possibly 2. "Come with me," he suggested one night as they lay tangled in sheets, the moonlight casting shadows across Eliza's apartment. "I can't just abandon my business," she said, though the thought of Tuscan sunsets with James made her heart ache with longing. "Everything I've worked for is here. You could expand, plan events in Italy. Think of the connections you'd make." But they both knew it wasn't that simple. Eliza had clients depending on her, contracts extending months into the future. Her sister was expecting a baby, the first grandchild in their family. Her life was rooted here. "Long distance then," James said, trying to keep his voice light. "People do it all the time." But as the departure date approached, a heaviness settled between them. The night before his flight, they sat on Eliza's balcony, a bottle of wine between them, the same rare vintage he had served at the party where their professional relationship had first shown hints of something more. "I keep thinking about what you said that night," Eliza murmured. "About the best things in life being unplanned." James traced the rim of his glass. "I meant it." "Then why does this feel so planned? So inevitable? You go to Italy, I stay here, we try to make it work until..." "Until what?" Eliza couldn't voice her fear, that distance would erode what they had built, that one or both of them would choose simplicity over struggle. "I don't want to hold you back," she finally said. James set down his glass with deliberate care. "Is that what you think you're doing? This opportunity is everything you've worked for." "Not everything." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Eliza, when you hired me that night, I was at a crossroads. I was considering leaving all this behind, the consulting, the events. I was tired of helping other people realize their visions instead of creating my own. You never told me that. Because meeting you changed everything. You reminded me why I fell in love with this work in the first place. You showed me what passion looks like." Tears blurred Eliza's vision. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you. I'm saying we'll figure this out, not because it's easy, but because what we have is worth fighting for." The next morning, at the airport, their goodbye was a mixture of tears and promises. They had agreed to visit every 8 weeks, to talk every day, to never let the sun set on an unresolved argument no matter the time difference. The first 3 months were harder than either had anticipated. The time difference made communication a challenge. Eliza threw herself into work, taking on more events than was wise. James immersed himself in the vineyard renovation, sending her pictures of his progress and the Tuscan landscape that now felt more like exile than paradise. During their first reunion, when Eliza flew to Italy for a week, something felt off. They were trying too hard, both aware of the limited time, the pressure to make every moment count. She returned home feeling more distant than ever. It was during this low point that fate intervened again. A renowned Italian fashion designer contacted Eliza about planning her wedding, in Tuscany, just 20 minutes from where James was working. The job would require multiple trips to Italy over the next 6 months, culminating in a 2-week stay for the event itself. As Eliza stepped off the plane for her first planning visit, she felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She and James had agreed to have dinner that night, but their recent video calls had been strained, filled with superficial updates rather than real connection. She checked into her hotel, changed, and was about to call a taxi to the restaurant when her phone rang. "Change of plans," James said, his voice tight. "Can you meet me at the vineyard instead? Is everything okay? Just, please come." An hour later, as her taxi wound up the hill toward the vineyard, Eliza's mind raced with possibilities. Was he ending things? Had the distance finally proven too much? The vineyard was breathtaking in the golden hour light, rows of vines stretching toward the horizon. The driver let her off at the main house, a restored stone villa that James had described but she had never seen. She found him not inside but among the vines, standing before a section that looked newly planted. "James," she called, picking her way carefully down the row in her impractical shoes. When he turned, the look on his face wasn't defeat but something like awe. "You're here," he said simply, as if her presence was a miracle he hadn't dared to hope for. Before she could respond, he gestured to the young vines. "These are new. A varietal that's almost disappeared from this region. The previous owners thought this section of land was too difficult to cultivate, but I found historical records showing it once produced exceptional grapes." Eliza looked at the tender green shoots, still fragile but reaching determinedly toward the sun. "They're beautiful. They won't produce usable grapes for at least 3 years, James continued. "It's a long-term investment. A commitment to believing in what others have given up on." Something in his tone made Eliza's heart race. "Why are you telling me this?" James took both her hands in his. "Because I've named this section of the vineyard, Eliza. Because every time I work with these vines, I think about us, how the most meaningful things require patience and faith." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I've been so afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that what we have isn't strong enough." "I know," he said softly. "Me too. But then I realized something. The night we met, when you hired me, you took a chance on someone you barely knew because you had no other choice. Now we're choosing each other, every day, despite having every reason to take the easier path." That night, over dinner in the vineyard's small kitchen, they stopped pretending everything was perfect. They talked honestly about their fears, their struggles with the distance, their insecurities. And in that honesty, they found their way back to each other. Over the next 6 months, as Eliza worked on the fashion designer's wedding, she and James developed a new rhythm. Instead of trying to compress their relationship into brief visits, they learned to integrate their separate lives. James became involved in the wedding planning, offering his expertise on local wines and venues. Eliza began to understand the vineyard's renovation, offering suggestions that bridged her event planning skills with his agricultural knowledge. During one of her planning visits, Eliza brought her assistant Maya, who immediately clicked with Paolo, James's right-hand man at the vineyard. Watching them fall into easy conversation, Eliza had an epiphany. "We could do this," she said to James that night as they sat on the villa's terrace, the stars impossibly bright above them. "Do what?" "Build something together. Not just our relationship, but our work. What if Bennett Events had a European division? What if your wines became part of our signature offerings?" The idea took root, growing like the young vines James had planted. By the time the fashion designer's wedding arrived, a spectacular 3-day event that garnered international press, they had a plan. Eliza would split her time between the US and Italy, gradually training Maya to handle more of the American operations. James would continue the vineyard renovation while developing a consulting business that complemented Eliza's events. It wasn't a perfect solution. There would still be separations, still be sacrifices. But now these challenges felt like part of their shared journey rather than obstacles to overcome. 2 years to the day after Eliza had first called James in desperate need of a sommelier, they hosted a special event at the now thriving vineyard. They invited everyone who had been part of their story, from the tech mogul and his wife whose party had brought them together, to Maya and Paolo, now engaged themselves. As the sun set over the Tuscan hills, James led the assembled guests to the section of vineyard he had named after Eliza. The once fragile shoots had grown into strong vines, and this fall would produce their first harvest. "When I planted these vines," James told the gathered friends and family, "they represented hope, faith in something that hadn't yet proven itself." He turned to Eliza, taking her hands in his. "Now they represent certainty. The knowledge that some connections, once made, only grow stronger with time and care." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring, the diamond catching the last rays of sunlight. "Eliza Bennett," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes, "you hired me for one night. I'm asking you to hire me for a lifetime." Through tears of joy, Eliza managed to say, "I think I can afford your rate now." Their wedding, held the following spring among the vines they had nurtured together, became legendary in its own right, not for its extravagance, though Eliza's planning expertise ensured it was beautiful, but for the palpable love that infused every moment. They wrote their own vows, each promising not perfection but presence, to face whatever came next together, to find beauty in the difficulties as well as the joys, to never forget that the greatest adventures begin with a single leap of faith. As years passed, their business ventures flourished, becoming a sought-after partnership in both the event planning and wine worlds. But it was their love story that became their legacy, shared first among friends, then in a feature for a bridal magazine, eventually inspiring a best-selling novel and film adaptation. When asked by an interviewer what made their relationship special enough to captivate so many, Eliza smiled and looked at James, the lines around his eyes now evidence of years of laughter and shared experiences. "We were just two people who might never have met if not for a cancelled flight and a desperate phone call," she said. "But once we did meet, we recognized something in each other worth fighting for, worth adapting our dreams to include the other person." James nodded, adding, "The magic wasn't that we found each other. It's that we kept choosing each other, even when it would have been easier not to." Their story reminds us that sometimes, the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary circumstances. A business transaction. A professional relationship. A single night that changes everything. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more tales that remind us of love's incredible power. Share in the comments your own unexpected love story, because every legend begins with a moment that seems ordinary until time reveals its true significance.